What would King's moveset look like? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about how King the Wildfire would look like in Pyro Warriors 4 or in any, Pyro Warriors 5 or whatever sequel that we might get him in, or in another character pass. Okay, so King is a very interesting character because it's kind of insane that he's not going to be part of the next character pass, considering both the episode where he fought Zoro and the episode where Sanji fought Queen were two of the best episodes of the entire year for One Piece. Like, that was an insane back-to-back. Obviously, we got the Gear 5 stuff now, but, you can even argue that maybe those two episodes are more consistent and better produced and directed than the Gear 5 episode, at least the introductory one. So, it's kind of insane that they were like, we're not going to include any of that for this character pass. Now, I get that they've been radio silent for 3 years and they're gonna maybe try and do catch up with more character passes, if not a whole brand new game altogether. But it is interesting that he's not in the data mines as of right now. Now, obviously, this isn't like, oh, they thought of the character pass yesterday, the day before the trailer came out and it had already. Obviously, they planned these things in advance, and who knows, maybe they spent the 3 years doing a bunch of different things and reorganizing a ton of stuff, and maybe we got a character pass 3 and 4 coming. That's why we're getting this now. All that being said, let's get into the first of the 3 sections here. What type would he be? Now, King, I feel like, is an interesting character because I feel like King could match up with every single typing that's in the game. Now, I know that's weird to say because I feel like you can make the argument for that for anybody, really. But King specifically is a character that's very powerful, like very, very powerful, right? Especially in the anime where they do, like, the scale of King's power is actually kind of nuts. So when King has the fire on his back, he is very powerful. So I could see him as a power type. Then you have this moment where he's fighting Zoro, and whenever his flames go out, he is much, much faster, right? This part where I'm putting up the clip now, where Zoro's just like trying to keep up with him, and then King comes in and drop kicks him. So like, that's an insane, like, he's pretty fast. Obviously, the big obvious one is that him being a sky type, because he does fly in his, I believe, in his base form and in his like pteranodon form. So he has literal wings. So wouldn't be surprised if he could fly, or they make him a sky type either. And I even say a technique type because like Zoro addresses it and so does King. But in the fight with King and Zoro, King starts to fight Zoro, and Zoro notices that like King's body and his like he is so gimmicky, right? Like, Zoro would hit him, then he could explode. Then Zoro would clash with his fist, but then like spikes would come out, like like knuckles would come out of his, his fist. And then the sword itself that King uses transforms into like a sword breaker. So Zoro, I believe, said that like you're not really like a proper fighter, you're like a killing machine, an assassin pretty much. And King also acknowledges that, and he basically says like, well, yeah, you don't have to have like basically like proper etiquette and skill or like training to be insanely powerful. So very interesting, like, on that sense in their fight. So King, and you include all the fire stuff too, like Kinemon, because Kinemon is a technique type in the game. You can argue that King could be every single typing in the game, but for the sake of posterity, I do think they would lean on King to be a proper power type, because of just the scale that he has. I wouldn't be surprised if they made him a sky type either. However, I'm gonna go into it now because I feel like it's warranted now, and I'll get into it, I guess, a little less later. But King has multiple forms, right? So I don't know if they would pick for his character design, if they're gonna pick the traditional looking King with the mask and everything. I feel like they would, even though personally I would want him without the mask. But they could do this in 2 ways. They could have him be in the more iconic, like quote-unquote BDSM look, and then his full force burst, he takes off the mask, and he looks like that. And obviously it could be like that because Katakuri in his full force burst takes off the scarf and then just comes back, right? So he could put the mask back on after the full force burst, and then he can also have a form change into the pteranodon that makes him a sky type. So he could be power sky, or he could just be sky, or he could be speed sky. So I feel like if they're gonna do anything, I feel like those would be like his typing. So yeah, that's all I have to say on that. All right, now we're getting into his combos, which are really, really cool. So when King is fighting, like I mentioned before, he's kind of like literally like a wildfire. He doesn't have any proper moves or techniques. So it was kind of interesting when I was looking around through the character list that's already in the game to kind of gauge how they would make him. And wouldn't you know it, another unlikely character came to mind, because much like Rayleigh, where I said I feel like Tashigi might be a more, or even Mihawk would be a more suitable like style if you're gonna look at someone like Rayleigh, I think that King would play similar to Smoothie. Now, I don't think that's that much of a jump, because Smoothie is a power type, but also she has like elemental stuff to her attacks. Like they make it look like water, right? So it looks really cool. Her range of attack in the game, like you're seeing in the gameplay, which is why like I had her up there. No other ulterior motives. I think that Smoothie would be like an idea of how King would play, because you can think about all the fire attacks that he would do. Her size isn't as big as King, I don't think. However, she has a giant form that makes her as big as Kaido, and she's still like fast as hell, which is why like when in hindsight, when I came to think of this, I'm excited for hybrid Kaido, because Smoothie giant form can jump up in the air and do the exact same air combos that she could on her normal size. That is pretty nuts. So I'm excited that hybrid Kaido might work like her too. So, and if King is bigger than Smoothie, well, there you go. That's another answer to it there, because Smoothie gets as big as Kaido and she can still do all the air stuff and all this crazy stuff. So, you know, she also has a little gimmick where you have to like, you know, take the moisture from people and then it amplifies your attacks. So I think King would be very, very similar in his moveset to her with all the fire stuff. Maybe he has a gimmick where, maybe you know how like you have to, you know, grab the moisture from people. For King, kind of similar to Eneru, you have to keep up your like kind of flame level, or you know, work around the fact that your flame is about to go out and stuff like that. And then you might take a little bit more damage, but you do more damage maybe because you're faster. So, you know, it could kind of work like that, because obviously that's a big part of King's like mechanic, he even says. So, you know, that'd be interesting. But another character he would play like is Kinemon. So King would be like if Kinemon and Smoothie had a baby. Not like that, because our boy Kinemon is a faithful man to Tsuru. So, you know, we know how he rolls. But if both of their movesets had a baby, I feel like it would be King. Exactly, because you amplify all the stuff with Smoothie. You see the crazy fire that like you can borderline lose or like have slowdown when you're playing as Kinemon, because there's just fire everywhere. So, you know, you take Smoothie and then you combine it with Kinemon's moveset, I think you'll get something very similar, or as close as you would get to King's moveset. My only thing is, I do think maybe until the Full Force Burst maybe, or his form change, I do think his air game could be okay, because King does also have a hybrid form where he doesn't really obviously fully turn into the Pteranodon. So, you know, he could have air combo game when it comes to that, where he jumps up, kind of like how Katakuri takes out the, you know, the mole, the Mugido or whatever, where he, you know, he starts stabbing you in the air. It could be a thing where King transforms, you know, into his hybrid form, and he does like those wing kind of like slashes in the sky and stuff like that, or that could be his triangle, who knows. So, you know, that could be a really cool aspect to King's character. So I think his air game would also be pretty good. Maybe not as good as a character like maybe like Smoothie or something, but I think his air game, when it comes to that, could be pretty good. So let's get into special attacks. The first one being, I think the big one, is obviously the Imperial Flaming Wings. Now, this is one where it's just a giant, you know, fire like esque dragon, and he shoots it and it has like consistency of like magma almost, because I think Zoro even addresses. So that thing is really hot, but obviously really powerful. And the way they do it in the anime, especially the scale that they have it at, I think would be obviously a proper level 4 attack. It could be something where, you know, maybe he jumps in the sky, you like kind of like how they did it in the anime, where he points his sword and then he shoots it out. Now I don't know if they would do the crazy anime version where like one shot out and then like it spawned like 12 different dragons and stuff. Maybe that could be another special, which I guess we'll get into it here. That could be another special where it's maybe a lot stronger, or they can minimize that scale and implement it into a sky combo potentially. But that is a very, very cool and powerful attack. The next one I have is obviously the Full Force Burst that I mentioned earlier. Won't get into it too much. Again, it could be a Katakuri situation where King is in his normal fit, but then you know, his full 4 burst makes him take off the mask, and then he goes into his, you know, unmasked form with his white hair and everything out. That'd be really cool because I think I prefer that version of King over the masked version, but I digress. The next one I have would be probably his biggest ultimate, and that is the extra large Imperial Flaming Wing. So this is the move in the manga. I believe he just shot it at Zoro. It's a little unclear, but in the anime they made it where King envelops himself in this crazy fire dragon, like the bigger one, and then he flies against Zoro, and then they both clash, and then, you know, he ends up being defeated. But, you know, they could make this his, you know, his end all be all level 4 ultimate attack. So I think it's a really dope scene. So I think this would probably be his biggest attack out there. Now this will probably be a combo string, but again, it doesn't mean it can't be a special attack either. So I was thinking about the moment I mentioned earlier where King was like, you know, speeding around and then he drop kicked Zoro. I think that could be a really cool moment because in the anime he's like leaving like fire slices and stuff. So he could disappear, do a bunch of that, and then, you know, finish off with a giant like drop kick that sends a shockwave forward. So that could be another one, which I think will be pretty cool. Now this one could be funny because it is just really weird and awkward looking. But, you know, King goes into his hybrid form and then he like stands there and he just like starts waving his like wings, and he launches like apparently extremely powerful like air slashes and stuff. And it's just funny because he looks like he's like no effort, and he just launches a bunch of those. So that could be, you know, another attack where he just sends them flying. Before going to the form change, the last special attack that I can think of is the Imperial, like, you know, stake or whatever it's called. And that's when he is in his hybrid form, and I believe he grabs the back of his head and he, you know, he pulls it back and he basically slingshots a piercing like stake attack, and it basically hits Zoro in the midsection, and it also destroyed part of the island on Onigashima. So I can see that being probably the last special attack before I get into the form change. Speaking of form change, obviously I do think that if they were to include all of his stuff, if they were going to have multiple versions of him, it could be a form change into him being a sky type into the Pteranodon form. And in that form there's a lot of things he does. He does like, you know, Imperial like sling and arrows or something like that, or arrows and like something else. He does a lot of projectile, like almost like ki blast. He uses his wings as basically like extra swords, you know, very similar to Kaku, where Kaku uses the Rankyakus as like extra swords when he fought Zoro. So, you know, it's pretty cool. So I could see there's also this like UFO attack that could probably be a special attack that he did, where like he just like was like a spinning fire UFO, and he like was like clashing with Zoro, at least in the anime. So I think that'd be pretty cool. So I do think another one of the specials would probably be the, like, you know, kind of like this Gatling gun version of, you know, this like fire stuff. Again, this was his hybrid form, but they could also include the Imperial Archer, or, you know, they could make the form change actually the, you know, the hybrid form instead of the Pteranodon if they want to make it more, you know, different. But I digress. In general though, I feel like he would obviously be a sky type, and he would have a bunch of his moves that he does both in his hybrid form and in his full Pteranodon form. So I don't know, let me know what you all think about King the Wildfire's potential moveset, or like the stuff that I thought about when I was like looking around at his, you know, the moves he does in the anime and all that, and obviously and going around in the Pirate Warriors 4 like character list and seeing who he could play as. And, you know, I'm under the like belief that he would play like a merge version of Kinemon and Smoothie. So let me know what you all think. Let me know if you think I'm wrong. Absolutely. Let me know if I missed a move that you would like to see King do, or if I missed anything with King, because I feel like I got most, if not all, of his, you know, move sets that I can talk about at least in, you know, confidence. So let me know in the comment section down below if you enjoy. Leave a like. We're so close to 4K. We're about 50 subs away at the time of this recording, so make sure you guys hit that sub button, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out, everybody.